In today's episode of Today in World War II, February 16th, the famous desert rats are formed. A German freighter is captured, and lo and behold, 299 British prisoners are found and freed. The very first skirmish between the Afrika Korps and the British troops it takes place. The German U-boats move into the Caribbean and not for a holiday. The Japanese conduct a massively brutal massacre of Chinese civilians in occupied Singapore. The American fast carriers launch a massive raid against the Japanese main harbor in the Central Pacific Truk. And finally, U.S. paratroopers drop into Corregidor to free it from Japanese occupation. Let's get started. Okay, so on February 16th, 1940, the Desert Rats, the 7th Armored Division, is created out of the Mobile Division, and Major General Michael Craig was put in command. The there's a few divisions, allied divisions out there that really are worth remembering for their long service. The Desert Rats obviously is right up there with it. They were there through thick and thin from 1940 to 43, when they were able to lend a huge hand to defeating the Afrika Korps and Rommel in North Africa. Then they immediately went and they were involved in the landings in Sicilia and Sicily, I should say, and then Italy and so on and so forth. So they were it was an amazing division, and they fought valiantly, and they were a tough enemy for the Germans. Let's put it that way. I would just say that the Big Red One, the American Infantry Division, that was also there. The American 82nd and 101st Airborne, Third Mechanized, the Third Infantry Division as well. A lot of them, of course, the airborne units of the British were top notch. I mean, I could go on and on and on, right? There's some amazing divisions on the Allied side. But I do want to go on and on more and more about the fact that you really ought to subscribe to my channel. It's the human thing to do. It's the kind thing to do. So we're here in the middle of February. You know, Holidays are over. It's going to be a slog to get to spring. So bring a little springtime to my life by becoming a subscriber, clicking the bell to get notified whenever I drop a new video. That would be pretty nice of you. On February 16th, 1940, the German freighter Altmark, whose previous role in the war was to be the supply ship for the Graf Spee, which, as we know, a few months previously, in 1939, was finally tracked down by the Royal Navy off of Montevideo in Argentina in the River Plate, and it was defeated in battle and scuttled by the German Nazi commander because he couldn't bear the shame of losing his ship. Anyway, the Altmark was the supply ship for that pocket battleship. Meanwhile, it had made its way up to Norway, and it was using the neutral waters of Norway to slink its way back. Well, the RAF discovered it. A Hudson plane of the 233rd Squadron of the RAF found it and notified the Royal Navy, and the HMS Cossack went ahead with Churchill's permission, entered Norwegian territorial waters, neutral waters, and boarded and captured the Altmark. Lo and behold, what did they find? They found 299 British POWs. This started a firestorm, diplomatic firestorm about the violation of their neutrality. But the Norwegians really didn't have to worry about their neutral status much longer because the Germans were going to invade very soon, and it was all going to be put to rest anyway. But what never should be put to rest is my desire and your commitment to me and my content by liking this video and leaving a comment. Why? It's the algorithm. Algorithm rules our lives. And for me to grow my channel, I gotta co-opt it to be on my side. The only way I can do that is for you to help me by engaging. Engagement equals more viewers. So that's really the equation to it. So I appreciate it. February 16th, 1941, the very first skirmish, armed skirmish, firefight that took place between the British and the German Afrika Korps in Libya happened on this date near Sirte, Libya. Um, Not going to get into the minutia of what happened. I mean, honestly, who cares? This is again a very small piece of a mosaic of all the pieces, all the battles, all the skirmishes that made up World War II. I love these types of things. They're the motivation why I wanted to document this stuff because I don't know if a lot of people are really paying attention to this, but it fascinates me. And I'm sure that if there's people like me out there who are obsessed by this and captivated by it, it'll be have the same effect on you. Uh, again, whenever I do get permission from the game makers of Trivial Pursuit, and to do a World War II game, that definitely is going to be a question about, where the first skirmish took place between the Brits in North Africa and the German Afrika Korps. So on February 16th, 1942, the German U-boats, this is the middle of the second happy time after the United States was brought into the war by the attack on Pearl Harbor. They had now made their way into the Caribbean. On today's date, a German U-boat 156 sank two ships and actually surfaced and bombarded uh, shore facilities at Aruba, which was a Dutch colony, and another U-boat 502, sank three small tankers off the Gulf of Venezuela. There was other attacks by Italian and German submarines throughout the region. So the Caribbean, the nice, pristine, tropical waters, blue, just beautiful, except when there's hurricanes. This started for the next few months. Unescorted merchant ships, especially tankers, they're gonna find they're like it's like they were like light to moths going to the flame to attack, and that's what was going on here. Sadly, on February 16th, 1942, the Suk Ching massacre began in Singapore. The Japanese had just occupied Singapore. They decided they were going to vent their wrath against the ethnic Chinese civilians of Singapore. There are two different estimates of how many civilians were butchered in the following 3 weeks. The Japanese say it was only 5,000, only 5,000. Singapore estimates that it was more like 100,000. I don't know about you, but I tend to believe the Singaporeans over the Japanese estimates. Boy, it just goes to show you the Japanese were a scourge in the Pacific, and boy, there was never a more needed crusade or Judgment Day than the Japanese. They needed that for what they did in that war. And then well, speaking of massacres, but this time in the Western theater, uh, Italian soldiers began a 2-day massacre in Greece, in Dominican, and they executed a total of 175 male civilians. Again, it was reprisals, it was payback, it was war crimes. If the Greek resistance fighters and partisans had killed any Axis forces, then this is what happened in reverse, taking innocent civilians and put them against the wall and, firing squad styles, killing them. This was a war crime, and that's what they were all about, war crimes. On February 16th, 1944, the U.S. launched Operation Hailstone, the Fast Carrier Task Force. Newly, like I said, since 43, more and more carriers have been introduced into the war. I think there was like six or seven of the top of the line fleet Essex carrier class carriers there. Had about six or seven light carriers. 700 to 800 strike aircraft, fighters, bombers, torpedo planes were available, and they were let off the leash and sent to Truk in the Caroline Islands, which was the main naval base for the Japanese Navy in the Central Pacific. And in a 3-day attack, they decimated that harbor. The Japanese lost 32 merchant ships, 270 aircraft, 3 cruisers, 4 destroyers, and 3 auxiliary cruisers. They absolutely leveled that place. And it just goes to, and they were going to do, they did this the rest of the war. They were like locusts coming against poor farmers. There was no way to stand up against them. So they went whenever they wanted to, and they left destruction in their wake, and more power to them. And finally, on February 16th, 1945, the 503rd Regimental Combat Team of the U.S. Airborne Forces parachuted into Corregidor, landed on the island itself, the Philippines, in Manila Bay, and they were able to take out the Japanese garrison there. With the landing on Bataan and yesterday's video, and with this successful attack on Corregidor, it kind of put bookends on the American humiliation and their surrender in 42 against overwhelming Japanese forces. And after the atrocities and the war crimes that were committed against U.S. troops after that, it was good for the U.S. to come back and reclaim that and free that. And eventually, a couple years later, then the Philippines would become their own independent nation, and they'd be free from the scourge of the Japanese and their barbarity. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it, and I can't wait to show one to you tomorrow.